Hello, my dear friends. I am Dylan. I am a lonely wife in a cold marriage with my husband. One night, when my husband was away from home in a moment of self-discovery, I was caught by Charles, my father-in-law. Instead of leaving, a silent, intense bond began to develop between us. The random encounters gradually became intentional, leading to a seductive and morally conflicting affair. Now I can no longer find emotions in my husband's arms when the image of Charles, my father-in-law, has been imprinted in my mind. But this relationship can ruin everything. Should I continue or stop? Please give me the answer. On all fours, I felt my breath, heavy and damp, pressing against the leather couch in the dimly lit living room. My nightgown clung to me, hiked up above my waist, while beads of sweat matted my hair to my neck. I grasped the edge of the cushion, swaying gently in a languid rhythm. The rain outside fell softly, its gentle taps against the windows creating a soothing rhythm, while within me stirred a warmth I had not experienced in years. The front door, ever so slightly ajar, welcomed a cool midnight breeze that caressed my back, sending delightful shivers racing down my spine. I ought to have sealed it, I ought to have secured it, yet I was lost in the intoxicating allure of concealment, yearning to experience that longing once more. When I finally paused and shifted my gaze toward the doorway, there he was, Charles, my husband's father, silent and still, his eyes fixed intently on me, not my face, not the floor, but me, my wet cat, bare, shimmering, pulsing, and quaking. He remained silent, his eyes unblinking, simply observing, and in that instant, everything was shattered. To my incredible audience, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for your presence here. Dear subscribers, your unwavering support is truly invaluable to me. Thank you to both our new and returning viewers who have yet to subscribe. I eagerly anticipate your click on that subscribe button. It is the very essence that energizes this channel and inspires me to share more stories like this one. Be sure to share your reflections in the comments below. I delved into each and every one, so allow me to commence from the very start. Perhaps if I share this with you, it will illuminate how I allowed myself to reach this point. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Dylan, a 32-year-old who has shared 8 wonderful years of marriage with my husband, Joseph. In the early days of our marriage, every moment was infused with novelty and thrill. Kisses were abundant, touches were genuine, and the intimacy was truly satisfying. Yet, as the years passed, that once vibrant flame began to flicker and fade. Joseph grew increasingly absorbed in his work, becoming more remote and elusive. His frequent business trips made it seem as though I was living in solitude. He would return bearing gifts and a weary smile, yet devoid of love, passion, or attention. For months had slipped by since his hands last found their way to me, and by touched, I do not refer to the fleeting graze of his fingers against my hips as he hurried past in the hallway. No, I mean the kind of touch that erases the passage of time, so I turned to myself for solace. I explored my own body frequently, yet it never seemed to satisfy me until that night when something within me shifted. On that Saturday night, I had just indulged in a long, hot bath. The fragrance of lavender and coconut oil lingered in the air, mingling with the dampness of my skin. I slipped into a silk nightgown, delicate and brief, the sort that Joseph had long ceased to acknowledge. I traversed the house, a thrill of danger coursing through me. Something inexplicable took hold of me as I laid a soft towel over the living room couch, extinguished all the lights save for the gentle glow of the lamp in the corner, and knelt down. My fingers glided to the hidden realms that yearned for discovery, for indulgence. The front door had failed to close properly earlier. I recalled the sound of it clicking, though not locking, yet that thought faded as my fingers delved deeper, and I pressed my face against the armrest, stifling my moans into the cushion. Time slipped away, perhaps longer than anticipated. Engrossed in my own cadence, I initially failed to notice the footsteps. Yet, something compelled me to halt, a chill, a shadow, an unmistakable presence. And there he stood, Charles. He arrived without warning. Earlier, Joseph had mentioned that his father might stop by to deliver some tools. I had completely overlooked it. In that fleeting instant, all memory slipped away from me. He remained silent. I recall the sharp intake of breath, my hand instinctively darting down to shield myself, my knees sliding against the smooth leather. I attempted to adjust my nightgown, but alas, the harm had already been inflicted. He had witnessed it all. I gazed at him, immobilized. My legs trembled, my heart thudded like a relentless hammer against my chest. He then turned and departed, silent, akin to a specter. I remained on the floor for what felt like an eternity, enveloped in silence, my body trembling as I wrestled with the thought of whether he had been a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew he was real. The soft click of the door sealing shut signaled his departure, yet he took with him an indelible mark, a memory, a fleeting vision, a truth that was never intended for his eyes. I slipped into the bathroom, secured the door, and settled beneath the cascade of the shower until the water turned frigid. Thoughts surged through my mind, while my body throbbed with energy. The shame, oh the shame, echoed with a deafening intensity, yet overshadowing it all was something far more profound. Anticipation. At that moment, I was unaware, yet an unspoken change had taken place between Charles and me that night. He had witnessed me in my most exposed, unguarded moment. He had observed, and a fragment of my being, merciful heavens, relished that he did. I spent the night wide awake, and when dawn broke, an unsettling change lingered in the air of the house. I lingered in the bedroom that Sunday morning, reluctant to emerge until the sound of the front door closing reached my ears. I glanced through the slats of the blinds and caught sight of Charles maneuvering his way out of our driveway in that weathered gray truck of his. He had ventured indoors, likely to retrieve his tools or to act as if the events of the previous night had never transpired. I was convinced he would remain silent with Joseph. What could he possibly articulate? He witnessed his daughter-in-law, bent over and drenched, indulging in her own pleasure with an intensity that suggested possession, all while the front door remained ajar. He would conceal it, burying it deep within the earth. I believed he would conceal it, yet what I failed to grasp at that moment was that a door, once ajar even if by mere chance, never fully shuts again. Later that day, I tended to the living room as if it were sacred ground. Each and every inch of that couch seemed to carry a sinister weight. I doused it with spray, wiped it clean twice, and meticulously rearranged the pillows, as if I were attempting to banish my scent from the very air around me. Joseph returned home from his business trip at approximately 8 p.m. That evening, he pressed his lips gently against my forehead. That was everything, my forehead, untouched by his lips, my neck, ungraced by his caress, and not even a flicker of longing in his gaze. He recounted tales of meetings, airports, and a lamentable sandwich he encountered at a certain hotel. I nodded, prepared dinner for him, and smiled as if everything was perfectly ordinary. Yet within me, a fire raged. That night, we lay down to sleep, our bodies untouched by each other. He lay beside me, snoring softly, utterly oblivious to the world, while I remained wide awake, my gaze fixed on the ceiling above. It was the following morning that I encountered Charles once more. In the kitchen, I found myself immersed in the ritual of brewing coffee. A gentle black robe draped around my waist, its ties hanging loosely, offering a sense of comfort and ease. My legs were exposed. I rested against the counter, a yawn escaping my lips, my mind drifting through a haze of thoughts both trivial and profound. In that moment, I sensed it, the tug of an unseen connection, an ethereal cord binding me to something greater. I pivoted gradually, and there was Charles, poised at the sliding back door. His gaze was fixed on me once more, our eyes intertwined in a silent exchange. Silence enveloped the space, an unyielding gaze anchoring everything in place. Yet, on this occasion, it lacked the sensation of shock or confusion. It was a sensation that was both deliberate and inquisitive, evoking a sense of intrigue. With deliberate care, I eased the door open. "Joseph isn't here," I replied, striving to maintain a steady tone. "I understand," Charles responded. He entered with a serene demeanor, clad in his familiar work jeans and a white t-shirt that hugged his shoulders. His scent was a blend of aftershave and the crisp aroma of freshly cut wood. His gaze lingered for a brief moment on the small opening of my robe that revealed a hint of thigh before returning to meet my eyes. He rested against the counter, positioned directly opposite me. He spoke softly. "I didn't mean to startle you last night." I took a deep breath. "I was under the impression you had departed." Indeed, I did so afterward. The atmosphere surrounding us grew dense. The warmth surged once more between my legs, and I loathed it. I loathed the swiftness with which my body turned against me. "You should have knocked," I whispered. "You ought to have locked the door," he murmured in reply. His voice flowed like smoke, smooth and perilous, an intoxicating allure. I ought to have exited the room. I ought to have forcefully shut the door. I ought to have let out a cry, yet I remained there, paralyzed. Not in fear, but in a state of something far more perilous. A yearning that stirs the soul. He advanced with measured steps. My heart thudded in my ears. With each step he took toward me, my breath hitched in my throat. His eyes, oh those eyes, they bore no resemblance to what one would expect from a father-in-law. They resembled those of a man. A man who had once glimpsed my essence, now yearning for deeper understanding. He lifted his hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed my cheek. I shut my eyes. Suddenly, Joseph's voice echoed from the upper floor. Have you come across my charger?" I recoiled from Charles as though I had been struck. I instinctively reached for the ties of my robe, pulling them taut. Charles inhaled deeply, his fingers combing through his silver-streaked hair as he retreated toward the door. "I was merely retrieving my wrench," he declared with a raised voice. "Do you recall leaving it on the porch?" "Indeed." I responded with haste. He nodded and exited, silent as always. Yet a fracture had formed in the fabric of it all. Amidst our shared space, or perhaps not broken, but rather opened, much like that confounded door. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, and with Joseph lost in the cascade of the shower, a message pinged on my phone. The call came from a number shrouded in mystery. I unsealed it. "In the future, do not halt." No name, no emojis, merely that solitary sentence. I gazed at the screen for what felt like an eternity, my hand trembling ever so slightly. I ought to have removed it. I ought to have severed the connection with that number. Yet, I refrained. Instead, I immersed myself in its pages once more. Twice, I responded with my words. "It would be best if you refrained from texting me." After a brief pause, he responded, "Yet, you desired my gaze upon it." I set the phone aside and made my way to the bathroom. I observed Joseph as he scrubbed his hair, a tune from the 90s escaping his lips, as if everything were perfectly ordinary, as if our marriage remained pristine, as though his wife had not been vulnerable and laid bare to his father merely 48 hours prior. I perched on the toilet lid, observing him intently. I endeavored to conjure the image of the man I once adored, the man I once longed for. Yet I found myself unable to do so. That evening, I refrained from reaching out to Joseph. I faced away from him in bed, my gaze fixed on the ceiling once more. By Thursday, Charles had visited 3 additional times. Once to deliver the tools. Once, I found myself on a mission to return a casserole dish. It is necessary to inspect the wiring. With every encounter, he discovered an excuse to brush against my hand, to rest his fingers on my back, or to lean in just a fraction too near. And I allowed him to proceed, not out of a desire to betray trust. Yet, for the first time in years, I experienced the profound sensation of being truly seen, seeking, yearned for. His eyes revealed the truth without uttering a word. They revealed precisely what he believed about me, precisely what he intended to accomplish. And, even more troubling, they revealed what I had longed for in silence. Charles and I ventured into uncharted territory the day his hand brushed against my thigh. Saturday had arrived. Joseph had ventured out for a day of golfing with his friends, not expected to return until the evening hours. As I folded laundry in the living room, Charles once more made his entrance through the back door. At this juncture, I had ceased to secure it. I refrained from inquiring about his presence. He strode directly over, seized a pair of Joseph's socks from the basket, and locked his gaze onto mine with unwavering intensity. "You realize this will destroy everything," he remarked. I nodded, despite the constriction in my throat that rendered me speechless. He settled next to me on the couch, our legs brushing against each other in a subtle connection. My heart quickened. My concentration eluded me. Breathing felt like an elusive task. I attempted to avert my gaze, yet he leaned closer, his fingers gliding softly along the tender skin of my inner knee. "You are trembling," he remarked. I was indeed. I loathed it, yet I adored it. "I ought not to desire this," I murmured. "Yet you do." My body reacted instinctively, even before my mind had a chance to comprehend. My legs moved subtly, my breath caught in my throat. The tension that enveloped us grew, becoming almost suffocating. He leaned in gradually, refraining from making contact with my lips, allowing the tension to build until I closed the distance myself. Our lips brushed together tenderly at first, filled with curiosity and hesitation, yet the softness soon gave way to something more fervent. The kiss intensified swiftly, filled with desire and urgency. His hand glided up my thigh, slipping beneath the fabric of my robe. I refrained from intervening. I revealed myself to him as if I had been anticipating this moment for an eternity. He murmured my name against my neck as I leaned into him. It was not love. It lacked the essence of romance. It was unveiled. In that moment, all the loneliness, the neglect, and the quiet rejection I had experienced from Joseph came rushing forth. Charles gathered me into his embrace, settling me comfortably on his lap. I positioned myself above him, my legs quivering, the fabric of my robe falling away. He pressed his lips against my chest, my stomach, my inner thighs. His hands moved with a familiar grace, instinctively navigating their way, performing actions that made me lose sight of the reality that he was Joseph's father, that I held the title of his daughter-in-law, that I was a wife. As he entered me, a gasp escaped my lips, not from discomfort, but from the sheer perfection of that moment. We advanced in a heavy silence, the soft whispers of skin against skin and breath mingling in the air around us. The couch groaned under our weight, a disloyal symphony to our treachery. We reached our conclusion side by side, my head resting against his shoulder, my legs entwined around his waist. For a time, we lingered in quietude. Then he murmured a phrase that drove the blade further in. "I might have chosen to marry a woman like you, yet I found myself retreating." "Don't say that," I replied hastily. Yet it was too late. The words lingered in the air between us, reminiscent of smoke. When Joseph finally arrived home that evening, I had meticulously cleaned every corner, indulged in 2 refreshing showers, washed the couch cushions, and even prepared his favorite dinner. Yet there was an unmistakable quality within me that he could perceive. He gazed at me as if attempting to decipher a message etched upon my features. Later that night, after we had enjoyed a movie and settled into bed, he reached for me. After weeks of anticipation, his hand glided down my side, slipping beneath the sheets, and I found myself frozen in place. My body turned icy, not due to a lack of love for Joseph, but because the lingering presence of Charles enveloped me, permeating my very being. I averted my gaze softly. "I am tired," I whispered. Without a word of protest, he withdrew his hand and turned away as well. It was at that moment that the guilt started to seep in. Not merely guilt, but a creeping paranoia. Whenever Joseph's phone chimed, it was always Charles on the other end. I found myself pondering whether he might falter, whether he might divulge secrets, whether he might resort to intimidation, or, even more troubling, demand further concessions. Yet Charles chose not to utter another word about it. Instead, he sent me messages in the late hours, filled with random thoughts. "You remain on my mind, still with great intensity. Your flavor is one of mischief." I made every effort to overlook him, I truly did. Yet, a fragment of my being sensed an undeniable dependence, enthralled by the longing for attention, the craving for desire, the need to be acknowledged. It was not until a fortnight later that the entire facade began to crumble. Joseph returned home, having left work early. His arrival took me by surprise. In the backyard, clad only in a delicate white tank top and my underwear, I tended to the garden, watering the vibrant plants under the sun's warm embrace. Charles stepped into the yard, passing through the side gate. From the vantage point of the kitchen window, Joseph caught sight of us. Charles lingered just a shade too near. I found myself leaning just a touch too far. It wasn't until the sound of the door slamming echoed through the air that I realized what had happened. I pivoted. Joseph remained frozen, his eyes wide and his face ashen. "Dylan," he said. "What on earth is this?" The hose slipped from my grasp. Water danced exuberantly across the verdant grass. "It's not what it appears to be," I replied hastily. "He is shielding himself." Charles remained motionless, his gaze flitting back and forth between us. Joseph gazed at his father, and in that moment, a fracture stirred within him. "You son of a bitch," he whispered. I anticipated a punch, yet he refrained from delivering one. He strode back into the room, the door crashing shut behind him. I dashed in after him, my heart racing, my throat parched. "Joseph, please," I implored. It was an error. He spun on his heel, his gaze ablaze with fury and incredulity. When he inquired about the duration, I found myself at a loss for words. He recoiled, a wave of revulsion washing over him. "You shared a bed with my father in the very home I call mine, during my absence." I extended my hand toward him, yet he recoiled, as if my touch seared his skin. That evening, he found himself resting on the couch. On the following night, he failed to return home entirely. The following day, he initiated the divorce proceedings. Charles never made contact again. Once this secret was revealed, it seemed to lose all its allure for him. Or perhaps he came to understand the extent of his own destruction. What we once held dear lay in ruins. Months have passed, and here I am in an empty house, my gaze fixed on the door that set everything in motion. The door I neglected to shut. Each night, I find myself pondering the question, had I secured it, would any of this have come to pass? Was the door ever truly the issue? Perhaps I was already vulnerable, already shattered, already in search of something I had misplaced ages ago. And Charles, he merely strolled through it.